Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
It's alive!
Welcome to where the weird ones are.
Every time I speak, I want the truth to come out.
Powerful figures in Hollywood as well as powerful politicians who are in fact not human. They're reptiles or they're lizards or perhaps extraterrestrials.
I don't think it is a human. I think it's a Sasquatch.
Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.
Let's get weird.
What's up, you fucking weirdos? Welcome to another episode of Where the Weird Ones Are. My name is Kevin, but you probably already knew that. And if you did not, now you do. Today's episode is with Christopher Packard. He is an author and science teacher here in Bangor, Maine. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation with Chris. I mean, not only just talking about his book, just talking about the homesteading, because he's a homesteader, just, you know, natural foods and things like that. It was a fun conversation. It was really enjoyable. If you ever get the chance to see him speak at any of the events, if you're in Maine, more central Maine, as would be his area, I think, of where he goes to. I don't know how far he travels, but I'm sure if you ask him, if you go follow his Instagram or his Facebook or whatever, you ask him where he's going to be, he'll more than gladly tell you what events he's going to be up to. So if you do get the chance to see him speak, I highly recommend it. He's very good at speaking at these events for his book. Also, you should check out his children's book, Lumpy's Gift, which is coming out December 1st. He actually just got an award for Mythical Creatures of Maine, so that's pretty fucking impressive. So anyways, so we'll get into our shout outs, which 1-0 podcast, you know I'm always going to do that. Mrs. Spooky Obsessed is no longer doing her podcast. She has way too much on her plate, and I wish her nothing but love and success in the things that she is going to be doing from here on out. The Conversation Cabin, the outrageously dark, funny, and true fucking A. I feel that it's too much of a mouthful for me to remember exactly what it is, but it's outrageously dark, funny and scary, but true podcast. They're really good. I really enjoy their podcast, so I think you should check it out if that is the correct name. But it's a long name like that, so it shouldn't be hard to miss if you type in all those fucking words. But the Tipsy Ghost also is phenomenal. And Mystic Talk. Mystic Talk is really good. So with that being said, if you like today's show, or if you like the show in general, please like, share, follow, and subscribe. That is the only way to help this show grow, although there are other ways too, like buying merch and just wearing your merch out and about, and people will be like, what is that? What podcast is that? And then you tell them, So Etsy.com/shop/where the weird ones are. That's where you will find the merch. Obviously, you don't have to do any of this shit. I am just saying if you would like to help out and spread the word that those are the ways to do so. And if you don't want to, then you don't have to do shit. You can just listen. So, website is coming soon. I'll let you know when it drops and what to expect in the website in the near future. So, with that being said, I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a good night, whatever time you decide to listen to this. And please check out Chris's book, Mythical Creatures of Maine. It's really interesting. I liked it. It's an easy read. It's not hard to like. There's no overly complex roundabout ways of describing something. So yeah, it's a good book. I liked it. I enjoyed it personally. So I hope you do too, and I hope you show him some love. Believe you can get his book on Amazon. So also, if you find him at one of the events, you can get the book there, and you can get him to sign it. So there is that. That's incentive to track him down. So with that being said, remember, question everything and stay weird.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Weird, get weird.
So, Chris, it's awesome to be able to finally sit down and talk with you on the podcast. If you don't mind, real quick, letting the two people that listen to my podcast know a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Well, that's great that you got a second listener. I'm Chris Packard, or Christopher Packard. I am the author of Mythical Creatures of Maine, which is a book that came out by Down East Books in 2021 in the fall. So it just celebrated the second anniversary of that. And it's been really fun, sort of like being the shepherd of these stories of the spirits of Maine, because it's a field guide and encyclopedia to all of the mysterious and wonderful creatures, magical and mystical and kind of scary sometimes, creatures that call Maine woods and waters home. I'm also a biologist by training, and I've been teaching biology in Bangor, Maine for the last I don't know, I guess a couple decades. And I live near Bangor, Maine, the home of Stephen King, I think not too far from where you live, and at least you're in Maine. And that's who I am. I'm a trail runner. I have a little homestead and a farm, and do all the things.
Nice. I didn't know that about you. I did not know you were a homesteader. I like you even more. So because I'm actually trying to start that. I got chickens, and the next thing I'm gonna have is goats, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, chickens are the gateway drug.
Exactly.
Animal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you get ducks and meat birds, and it's great. Yeah.
Yes. And my ex-girlfriend, her sister has goats, and she was when we were together, she was telling me about, goats and how to raise goats and stuff, and she actually got like I think 2 or 3 new baby goats while her and I were still seeing each other, and it was pretty interesting. She's like, "Yeah, I just use them for milk," She goes, "Because, um, goat milk is actually supposedly, this is what she said. I haven't looked into it myself, but she said goat milk is better for you than cow's milk. And also she's like, also, I don't have the land for a cow. So goat is it was a better option to begin with. So
Yeah, yeah, they're smaller. They're so smart, and we don't have any goats or anything right now. But it's a lot of work milking the goats. That's me milking the goats all the time, and but they're really amazing animals. You really get to know like the personality, even with chickens. Like
yeah.
they have personalities and like do things. Even the meat chickens, though, they all sort of have one personality, which is I'm hungry.
Yes. Yes, that is true. Um, so we got a bunch of chicks this spring, and I think accidentally got a male,
Mm.
and I'm pretty sure it's a male anyway. I haven't 100% picked it, uh, figured that out yet because I really don't know how, and I haven't really looked into seeing how. But he cock-a-doodle-doos in the morning. So that's one giveaway. So he's like rah in the morning.
That's a pretty good
Um,
sign.
yeah. And he jumps out of the enclosure all the time. He climbs up onto my garage roof. He'll
Oh my
walk
God.
around. It's like he's just like casing the joint, you know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
what's out here. And he's the only one that approaches me, and he's the smallest. So he doesn't seem to have like that girthiness to him. So
Really?
I definitely think I definitely think he's a rooster. But
Yeah. Well, if he
um
cock-a-doodle doos, he's probably a a boy.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So, for everybody watching the video on YouTube and Rumble, I have Chris's book right here, actually. So if you can see it, that is the cover of it. If you don't mind well, where can people find this book if
Yeah. So
they
it's
are
true.
so inclined to check it out?
Yeah. It's a traditionally published book. So it's put out with Down East Books, which means you can get it at any bookstore. If you happen to be in Maine, then, a lot of local bookstores carry it, and a lot of the big chains and the regional chains carry it here. But outside of Maine, you could ask anyone to get it, and they can get it through traditional channels. And you can also, of course, get it on the major online retailers such as Amazon, the evil empire, or the not so evil empire, whatever you want to think about it, I guess.
Uh, so I have read it. Um, and there's a lot of creatures in there that I had no idea were even in the area of Maine or even had stories about them existing. So that was interesting. So thanks for that. So one question that I did want to ask you, obviously I know you didn't haven't never got the chance to meet him, but if you don't mind telling us a little bit about Burton Marlborough Packard.
Yeah, so that's my great great grandfather, and he did a lot of things. He lived in the 1800s, the late 1800s. He was, he tried being a lumberjack. He tried going out west to Minnesota, and he was a stage driver, and had a pistol, and he ended up like broke in a bad gambling game and back in Maine, and then he tried his hand as a shipping sort of fellow to make ends meet. His father, my three greats grandfather, was a master shipbuilder in Searsport, Maine, on the coast, and so that's probably how I got in there. But he couldn't afford insurance, so his boat sank. And then he full on went into lumberjack mode, but then his partner stole all of the wood while he was closing up camp and sold it, and then was never seen again. And then the next year he went alone, and he got all the wood yarded up. These lumberjacks would hang out in the woods for all winter, and they'd cut, a lot of times farmers and stuff, trading stories around the fire and all that. And it all burnt up just as it was about to be skidded out of there and taken to market. So he had a run of bad luck, and he ended up at this little spool factory in Willimantic, Maine, which if you tried to put your finger in the very center of Maine, your finger would be right over the top. And it's called the Willimantic Spool Factory, and it was this great big settlement. There's only about 150 people in Willimantic now, but at the time there were more than twice that. And he ended up getting a store there and running a boarding house, and then he bought what became Packard's camps. It was called a lake house, or the lake house, and it was part of this sort of industry that was in Maine that would service, berry pickers and gum pickers and bear trappers and lumberjacks and swamp tote road, draggers and everything. And then also people who wanted to like get out of the city, like Boston and New York, would take a train up and they would stay there, and he and guides that he employed would take them around the Maine woods. And so he was this real woodsman that was at the crossroads of really all these different cultures, French Canadians and people who worked and lived in the woods, which of course was all the settlers in Maine. And he apparently learned all of these stories, and they've about various mysterious creatures from different cultures, and some of those stories sort of have passed down my family line and gotten to me. My family still owns Packard's camps, though it's in part of Sebec Lake, Maine, is named after us, but it's not an operational business anymore. But most of my family still lives in Willimantic, and there's about 150 residents, and about 15 of them are my relatives, which is kind of interesting. And so here I am down the road in the big city of Bangor, 30,000 people or so, and I also love the woods and being in there. I don't do a lot of tree cutting, but I love the stories of the creatures and beings that people encountered that were in there. And I spend a lot of time sort of adventuring on my own, doing all sorts of the great things that Maine offers us with wilderness.
I see a lot of the pictures on your social media of like these like little funky mushrooms every once in a while and stuff. I think there was like this really tiny red one that looked really cool. That was a cool picture. I'm fascinated by mushrooms, anyways. So, all forms of it, they interest me. But I saw, so I have a story that's going to be in Nomar's revision of his UFOs over Maine, where he tells all these like weird stories. And I think I don't know if it was a dream or not. Then this is what I told him. I was like, I did regression therapy, and um I think it could have been a dream, or it might be an actual memory, or I'm just, like I said, remembering a dream. But I came across like a mushroom village, just like these little like 3-inch, 4-inch mushroom people, and they didn't look like people that looked like mushrooms. They looked like mushrooms moving as people.
Wow.
So, and that was down here in southern Maine, in Sanford, when I encountered that, and I was like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, might be like the embodiment of why I am so intrigued by mushrooms themselves. And I did like I was trying to be a personal trainer for a while. Nobody seems to want to stick to it. They start it with like high hopes and they're all excited and motivated, and then it lasts like a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month at the most, and then they're
Right.
like, "Fuck this." But during that time, I started learning more about the benefits of edible mushrooms, like the port porta portabella.
That's the big
Por-
one.
Yeah, I guess they're like super beneficial for you in a lot of different ways. So, and you can buy like the big heads of them
Mhm.
at grocery stores, and fry them up or whatever and eat them. And I mean, it's good for your brain cells. It's good for a lot of things. Um, and then I recently heard this guy on Joe Rogan not too long ago he's like, if I tell you all the benefits from portobello mushrooms, I could get canceled or something like that. And I was like, what? Like, is this really information that people are trying to suppress right now, or the benefits of mushrooms? But I guess, anything's possible.
Anything. It's a crazy world out there for sure. I think just like eating like natural foods and like foods that are like actually like whole organisms or parts of them, where you can, see them, I think is good on so many levels. And, the benefits maybe go beyond that. And that's one of the reasons like we raise so much of our food. We've had shiitake logs and things like that, which are, you inoculate these logs and the mushrooms grow out of them, and they're just so good. And it's just neat to have like that relationship with things, like, and you get to know them. And I think that like it's more honest that way. And I'm a biologist, but I'm a strong believer that like things go way beyond science, right? Like all of our ancestors, whoever they were, had this relationship with the earth and sort of like knew a lot of things that we can't verify through traditional scientific methods, which have only really been around about 150 years. It's like the smallest way of knowing knowledge. And not that it doesn't do like absolutely amazing things, because it does, but it's not the only way of knowing the world or interacting with it, right? Like it's not all about like naming and separating, which is like what Western science, which is what I teach every day for a living, which is what Western science is about. It's about sort of like getting this, like interaction with the world. And I think, the world isn't limited at what we understand. So there's like a spiritual dimension to it. So like you said, like mushroom people, like absolutely, like mushrooms are alive. And I think we can know them in a different way than just the way that, science knows them. And not that what science tells us isn't important, but, they can, that relationship with that food or with these things we find in nature can be incredibly powerful and life-changing, as you just mentioned, like, so like they said, hey, Kevin, why don't you like be part of our group and like, have an interest in mushrooms, have a relationship with us. And I think that's so important in today's world. And we're so quick to dismiss that stuff. And we're also like, so like, we just forget that it's even important. And I think that's what like my great grandfather and like, and all of these ancestors, like that's where they were out there. Like that's stuff that they knew to some extent, though the 1800s is such a weird point. I think that's like where we started to like, at least like we like traditional American culture, like starts to like step away and say, no, science, right? And there's this entry in his journal where he made this deal to buy citronella oil from a captain who sailed down to the Caribbean. This was like just a tree oil, and he found out that it actually was a bug repellent. And so he was one of the first citronella dealers, like bug repellent dealers in he was always trying these new things, and that was one of them. And so he would go this way and that way and meet with obstacles, and and that's the kind of thing that science does for us. But it also leads to like all sorts of not great outcomes as well. And I think we're really struggling with that growth still, 200 years later, in 150 years later here in America, as we start to like rediscover the world and nature and our relationship with it. And it's a painful process, and
Absolutely.
it's a cool thing we discovered. It's science is a type of magic. Like I always wanted to be a wizard. I sort of settled for like scientist, and now I'm back to wizard. With writing this book, like and discovering these things. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that's fake, right? Like that's something that's just a story that people tell us, that if this exists, this can't exist.
Yeah, I think it's benefit both benefit us in a lot of different ways. I mean, they just had I can't remember when it was, but like speaking of food, um and organic food even. I mean, you being a homesteader, you grow your own food all the time. But when it comes to like fruits and stuff, especially berries, because berries absorb so much, they had a study where, all these strawberries that were sprayed with pesticides, they put them all together, they crushed them and they liquefied them, and there was enough pesticide in that juice of strawberries that they could spray another strawberry field.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible. I mean, strawberries are one of the dirty dozen, one of the, the ones that get sprayed the most, because we're
Yeah,
so like in the schoolyard where I teach, there's an apple tree, and there's a couple apple trees, and the apples are really good, and I'll eat one, and the kids will be like, the teenagers will be like, oh my God, that's disgusting. They all have like worms in them, and I'm like, not really. Like they just don't look perfect because they haven't been sprayed with poison their whole life. And we like that's the norm. That's the only way you make food for all these billions of people living in cities, out of there. And so, I guess it's the devil's in the details that we don't see. It's over there. Food's invisible and we undervalue it, but it's
exactly.
super important.
And it's another thing too is that our society has become uh more of, they want food that tastes good, where you don't need to be eating something that tastes good. You need something with sustenance. You need something that is actually going to benefit you as a person, instead of this processed stuff that just tastes wonderful, which I'm not opposed to something that tastes good. I mean, you can grow something right out of the ground. And it's going to I grew cucumbers this year and they were amazing. I love them. But when it comes to like all these fatty foods and all this, the granola bars, some of it, well, there's some granola bars out there that are made from all real ingredients, but then you get like even like candy and some candy, majority of candies, or all pretty much everything you find in the store has been processed to a degree.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, even
and
like the tomatoes don't taste the same as the tomatoes that you grow, or your cucumbers.
yeah,
Like there's like
yeah.
a fundamental difference. Like they're not sprayed. They're not like, they're growing together with other vegetables, multi-cropping as opposed to a big monoculture. And I think, all of that is good, is stuff that, and like vegetables, we want them to look good, and fruits, we don't even care if they taste as good. We're like, that looks good. Like, I mean, but you're right. Like granola bars, are just half the time just disguised candy bars. Like,
Pretty much, yeah.
yeah. So
So,
absolutely.
but anyways, getting back to your book, sorry to go a little bit off, but it's all stuff
Everything's
that
connected.
intrigues me, and it falls under the weird category. So, but so for everybody listening, if you do decide to get Chris's book, he has installments of his great great grandfather's journal all throughout it, with little stories from it.
Now, I
Um,
am going to say he did have a journal, but none of those quotes are actually from his journal. And it's
oh, okay.
buried in the introduction. So that journal is the only fictitious part of there. So there's like a little, like it looks like somebody ripped a page out of like a book, and it's like a
Yeah.
graphic. That's like flavor text. And so I wish that he had and he did have some interesting stuff in his journal, things that he did. But none of those things are in there. So I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. That would be
Oh.
absolutely amazing.
Well, that's what I
Like
get for
podcast
skipping the
over.
intro. Because I skipped the intro of every book, so that's my fault for,
Yeah,
for doing that.
yeah. That's my
Um,
favorite part of the whole book. It's about the reality of these creatures, and like kind of what I was talking about, how they can exist in a world where we you know, what is real is it kind of addresses, and how do you find these creatures, and you know, why doesn't science know about them? And you know, so I mean, it's not the favorite part of my book, but I that's the part that I was like, that's like my manifesto, I guess.
Yeah, nice. And one of your first stories in there, the first creature, I'm not even gonna attempt to say its name, so I'm just gonna give you bring up the nickname Widowmaker. So I spent the majority of my 20s as a God damn it, now I can't even think of the word. I used to cut trees for a living.
Yeah.
So and we used to call these big dead hanging branches that weren't connected to the tree and they were just stuck in the tree. We'd call them makers. So I find it super interesting that there's a creature that literally throws branches at you. So um basically I'm gonna go uh through a list of just like a couple of the creatures that you mentioned in your book and just ask you to elaborate on the story and their background a little bit.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Widowmaker is the first one
Yeah, the
that I would.
Widowmaker is also known as the aggro pelter. I'm not sure how it comes about that name. Pelter kind of to me sounds like something that would throw. And this is part of like a group of creatures that comes from the folklore of lumberjacks, as you might guess, like you were talking about being an arborist or something and cutting trees.
That's the freaking
Yeah,
word.
and I did some ecological restoration work, like which myths basically like on the oak savanna of Ohio before you know, when I was in college, before I moved back to Maine or to Maine. And basically we would cut a bunch of trees, and we also were always talking about widow makers. You know, you know, fire had been suppressed on this ecosystem for a long time, and we were cutting these huge oak trees, and like there was stuff hung up, and we're trying to remake this oak savanna that had been there. It was a very interesting job. And then we would like burn it, do controlled burns and all that to maintain the prairie. That was interesting. But these agro pelters are, you know, I mean, sometimes a branch just falls, but you know, what if, you know, the idea is that they're easily disturbed, and they're like the spirits of the trees, or like these monsters that live in the trees, these long-armed apes, and they never come down to the ground. They only suck on like dozy wood, which is this like rotted, punky wood. And it's the worst when you cut a tree and it's filled with dozy wood, which is just what the agropelter wants, because then as it starts to fall, it snaps in multiple directions, and who knows where it's going to go. But they can suck the moisture out of there, and they eat lichen, and even the slightest breeze or like somebody walking by and leaning on the trees will disturb these fellows. And it said that they would, you know, if they were around, they would throw these branches down at lumberjacks. And of course, like in the 1800s, when they were first cutting these, you know, in 1700s, when they're cutting these virgin forests that are these old growth places where people have never been. Well, I mean, people were there, but like where people had never harvested the trees, like the whole forest was different. It's said that like, you know, in science books that you know, before European settlement, a squirrel could hop from tree to tree from the Mississippi to the Atlantic Ocean and never touch the ground, because the forest canopy was so complete. And then of course, what do Europeans do? They're like, let's build ships and cities out of these great resources. Like, we don't have anything like this in Europe because we've already been doing that for hundreds of years. And that became a massive industry. It's how the town where I live, this tiny little town of Bangor, became the richest place in the world to live. And so, you know, to me, this creature, like all these creatures, like have, you know, a cultural lesson, I think, as well as like, you know, being, you know, an existence in themselves, like that there are spirits and beings in the forest that manifest in different ways. And, you know, all cultures talk about those, and they're angry when you go in and you disrespect it and cut it down. And of course, they're going to throw wood, right? So they, like many of the fearsome critters that interacted with the lumberjacks, have these like, you know, antagonistic, like, don't disturb me, like there are these warning stories because there's danger in the woods, and being a lumberjack is one of the most dangerous jobs even today that you can do, because it's so, as I'm sure one of the, some trees are very predictable, but it's the few that aren't that really get you going. And I mean, you see some crazy stuff happen out there, and is that chance, or is that the world interacting back with us, and being a little angry with us? I don't know. But that's where that story comes from. And there are these angry little apes with these big long arms that can just hurl these logs at you when you're not expecting, from above. And nobody has ever survived a log that was known to be thrown by an agripelter, except one fellow where it was all just dozy wood and it just shattered, and he was okay. He's how I guess we got the glimpse of the angry little ape. So some of these lumberjack creatures are like kind of fun and scary at the same time, and I don't think that means that I don't know what that means about them, but it means it doesn't mean that they're just a joke.
Right.
That I know.
Yeah, I found that that creature super interesting, and I was just like, huh. I was like, I've been hit by branches randomly before. I was like, I wonder. But like most of the time, I'm just like, oh, that hurt, and I wouldn't even like look up into the trees. I'd just be like, oh,
right,
that came right out of the tree and hit me. But
Do you need healing crystals? Do you need to get your chakras aligned and heal your mind, body, and soul? You need to check yourself and become one with the universe once again. Then I suggest you head on over to www.etsy.com/shop/heal with Christina. That's where you'll find all sorts of custom designed crystals for your healing and visual pleasure. I promise you won't be disappointed with the plethora of things you can choose from. Necklaces, healing crystals, all sorts of wire type things and such. Christina is a good friend of mine, and she enjoys helping people, so please help her out by checking out her shop. And at checkout, please use code WEIRD125 for a 25% off discount. That is www.etsy.com/shop/healwithchristina. And remember, friends, use my coupon code WEIRD125. That is a capital W on that, so you can get your 25% off discount. I promise you, you won't be disappointed in checking this out. Well, my friends, when you do, tell Christina I said hi. Stay weird, my friends. Well, friends, I need you to take a second. Head on over to www.fineartmedium.com. Emily is a medium, a working medium at that. She does readings, and she's artsy. She does graphic design. So, if you're in the market for a logo, because maybe you're starting a business, maybe you're even starting a podcast, and your logo needs met, Emily is who you want to reach out to. I promise you, you won't be disappointed in her artwork. I also know that if you need a reading, past life regression, this medium, not only is she compassionate, she's extremely intelligent. She will get your needs met. You can go onto her website, you can see all of her reviews. I promise you, my friends, you won't be disappointed in this. So give her your time if you're in the need for it. She made a couple of my t-shirt designs, and we're working on a comic book. So if you have graphic design needs, check her out. As always, my friends, stay weird. I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it. And by walking through it, my friends, head on over to www.deeperdown.store. There you will find some sick-ass threads, AI-inspired art on t-shirts, hoodies, flip-flops and cups, and motherfucking tote bags. I promise you, my friends, if you follow the rabbit, you will not be disappointed. You can also find _ down the dot rabbit hole _ on Instagram. He has thousands of followers, and he shows you deep down the rabbit hole on conspiracies, hauntings, and cryptids. I highly recommend you subscribe for $2.99 a month. Also, if you check out his store, upon checkout, enter code KevinsWeird18. There, my friends, you will get 18% off of your purchase. So please, I highly recommend and suggest to you to go check out his store. David is a good friend, and he deserves the utmost respect, and I wish him nothing but success. But this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
So I have, since you're as in seems to be as into nature as much as I am, so I came across this like a real clip of Theo Vaughn. I don't know if you know who he is. He's
Sure.
a comedian. And he was on the Joe Rogan show, and he asked Joe Rogan a question, but I feel like he might have been half serious, and it wasn't really meant as a joke. And I feel like that's I feel like it's a kind of a serious question, just because there's things that we used to be able to connect with way long ago. Like we were so much more connected with the earth and everything like that back in the day. Um, so I'll just ask you the question. Do you think that the wind is trying to tell us something that we don't know how to hear anymore?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I think I understand a little bit of what it's saying. I, that's such a weird question to ask me
I
because
know.
like I have this like really weird experience where like when I first started trail running, I would run around on this one trail near Bangor and I would end up on this big open hill and I would just stop and I would just sort of like reflect. And it was kind of like not only like a fitness practice, but also like connecting with nature and also like a personal practice of like, centering. And I'm into mindfulness and things like that.
Yeah.
And the wind would always blow across this. And then I swear that the wind like hummed a song to me. And every time I am stressed or nervous about something coming up, I sing or hum, and it's wordless, that song, and it brings me peace and sort of assurance. And so I think the wind has an awful lot of things to teach us, and we would do good to find the time to listen to the wind, or to the water or to the trees. And I can't say that I've had anything like that. And people are like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, the wind taught me that song." And it's kind of a joke. Like I say it like a joke, but it's not a joke, right? And we can hide a lot of truths in humor, right? Like I do it all the time when I'm teaching teenagers who don't want to know what I'm trying to teach them. If you couch it like in fun and funny, then it breaks down our defenses of this is how things are. And it's not like I'm saying that on purpose, but I also don't want to like, have somebody look at me and think like I'm crazy. Maybe I am, I don't know. But I mean, it's been a really good thing for me to have learned that song from the wind. So yeah, totally, absolutely,
Uh,
we should listen to that.
I'm so glad I asked you that question.
Yeah, it's
Because I
always
feel
disarming when somebody asks like a question and you're like, whoa, that's that hits really close to home, like, so yeah, absolutely. I'm
nice,
glad you asked
nice.
me that question too.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool though, that you were able to that you're able to find peace in serenity, kind of like through something that you heard within the wind. Because I asked that question in a group chat on Instagram, and everybody's just like, "Okay, calm down, Pocahontas."
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean, but if you like you introduced it like, oh, it was like a joke, but like I mean, and you did the same thing and I do the same thing. And there's and so like the agropelter is funny, right? And
yeah.
it's also scary and there's also important lessons about looking up and about trees being angry and
Mm,
about the forest being disrespected and disturbed and how that creates danger for you. So I think that's certainly a trick that my regular grandfather knew. The grandson of Burton Marlborough Packard, whose name was Marlborough Packard, his
oh,
father was Burton Packard Jr. And so unfortunately my name, I didn't get either of those names. That would be
yeah.
cool, but he was the master of humor and you could never really tell whether he was joking or serious, and I think he was both. And he knew, I mean, he was like a trapper and a hunter and a guide and like spent his life in the woods and up there in Willimantic, which is nowhere. And I mean, he knew everything and you could ask him anything and he would tell you, like, he was super pragmatic, but then like he would do all these like crazy things as well that were like, and say these things that you were like, is that real? Like he would tell me stories about not the agropelter, but some of the other ones in there, like the wedge ledge chomper, and the side hill gouger was one of his favorites. That's one of the most well known in Maine. People know that one still. And he had this one, a big ball-tailed cat called the Pelton Thumper, which is historically more known as the Plunkus or the Dingmaw, which was once like super common. Like if you look at old newspapers, it's all over it in the Northeast and Minnesota and all the way down to Pennsylvania. And it's just forgotten. And my grandfather used to tell, like, I've talked to hundreds of people about these types of creatures and like what type of like folklore or stories they've heard from their elders, their grandparents and aunts and uncles, or that they tell. And they never bring that one up, even though like it's definitely one of the most common. And they're funny, but they're serious as well. And he would do this thing where he would set up what's called a grimolican every time he would camp, or have a camp, like in Maine we call a cabin a camp. So like when he would camp in a tent, or when he would stay at one of his cabins that he leased from the timber companies, or at his house, he had these knot holes of wood that have like a would usually look sort of like a bird head, and he would stick a feather in it and it would look like it had an eye, and he'd hang it from a tree, and you'd be like, what are you doing? And he's like, that's a grimolican. And you're like, what's a grimolican, Grampy? And he's like, well, it's like it's an animal that comes alive at night, so you don't have to worry about what's around your camp while you're sleeping. And I was like, okay, well, that's weird. What a quaint thing, like as a younger person. And now that I've really like delved into this folklore and like really gotten into like what sort of this ancestral knowledge was, I found out that the word grimolican is, has a bunch of pronunciations and spellings, and it goes back to like Old English, and it means gray cat. And it was a word, or it meant witch, or it meant familiar. And like they were all sort of connected, right? And so here's my grandfather, this woodsman who could build anything and spend his time like guiding people through the woods and hunting and trapping and like living in the woods, was setting up these protection wards or spells or whatever in the woods. And there's still a couple by he's long since passed, but they're still in the woods in some places. And so that's a kind of an interesting thing.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Just spilling all the stories.
Yeah. Do you think that is why people put faces on trees too, like something kind of like that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think some people just do it like for fun, and because they like it. Like my three greats grandfather's face is carved into a tree that he planted as an acorn, supposedly, family legend goes, in the front of his house in Searsport, Maine, when he planted the tree when Abraham Lincoln was shot, as a memorial, because he was a big abolitionist, I guess. Yeah. And it now died, and then the owners of this, what's now his house, what was his house, is now a place called the Yardarm Motel, and they had his face carved into it. And so I don't know if they did that for protection, but I think my great grandfather would approve of that. And when I went to Chile about 5 years ago, there was a garden there that supposedly had faces that were, the spirits of this little sacred valley that were carved into the trees. In this one place where we were. So, I mean, some people, I think, probably do it that way, and some people just like it.
Oh, that's interesting. So is this your first ever book?
Well,
published book, I should say.
That's my first traditionally published book. I tried self-publishing a book back in like 2018 or something, and it was a real big goal of mine to be an author of books. I'd published some articles and things like that before in magazines, and so I published a children's book that my wife did the watercolor paintings from. And it was part of this, like, I do performance storytelling, and it was part of a mindfulness performance storytelling that I had done. It's called Lumpy's Gift, and they had it was about, like, Lumpy kind of looks like a little lump of poo, and he is a lump of clay that some potter digs up from the ground, and he's like, oh no. And Lumpy is like torn from his home, which is soft and wet and moist and squishy, just what clay loves. And he's brought in a bucket, and he's brought to the wheel, and he's shaped, and he's poked, and he's prodded, and he's wedged, and then he's fired, and he's painted with glaze, and he's fired again and dried, and then he's a beautiful cup. And so it's like a parable that, like, tells this story and also teaches, like, the process of, like, making clay from, making pottery from the ground, which is, another one of these ancestral skills. And I think a lot of stories, I think stories are supposed to teach lessons. And so I published that, and then didn't know what to do with it. So, like, a dozen people bought this book, and I knew most of them, maybe, probably, more, but not many more. And I never even got it into paper form. And so I've done so many things with this book that, and I organize, like, author events in northern Maine, where, I'm organizing one that's going to be in December that has, like, almost 100 authors will be at, and a bunch of publishers. And it's going to be the largest book fair in the state ever, in one of the smallest states, so whatever that's worth. And but I'm super excited about it. And I did it last year, and it was only 30 people, and I met so many people through that, and organizing the paranormal fair, where I met you at Fort Knox in Maine, not in Kentucky, for those not watching from Maine. And also, I organized the Maine Witch Walk, which is a fun Halloween event coming, and I just meet a bunch of people. And because I've done that, and I wrote a book, I met a publisher, 12 Willows Press, and he's like, I'd like to, why don't you send that over? And so it's coming out for real this time, and we did some revisions. So version 2, it's going to be available December 1st, Lumpy's Gift. And I'm so excited, because it's something that, like, my wife did the paintings, and I did the story, and it was from this, like, storytelling that my kids were at, and everybody had clay, and they were shaping it while I was telling the story. And then I still have, like, the original, like, Lumpy that I made. And so, nothing to do with, like, weird creature stuff, but has some stuff to do with, like, homestead, do it yourself, like, get your hands dirty. There's stuff to make what you need, which is a whole art that, like, you can't just, sometimes you get lucky and you can pull clay from the ground that you can work, but there's some processing that usually goes into it. And I went and I wrote some, like, back material for it. And I went and, met with an experimental archaeologist who was trying to, like, recreate Irish folk pottery, and see, like, what, if he could reproduce some of these, like, impressions that these people from ancient Ireland had, like, created in their pots, to see, like, was this how they made it? Would these markings come from that? And he discovered, like, some pretty cool things. And so I got to see the whole process of, like, harvesting your own clay, tempering it, wedging it, drying it out, grinding it up, like, rehydrating it, and then, making it into something that you can actually build with. And it's a real art. And, he was digging, in a local stream bank, like, and getting this clay that was, really not good for anything, but with just very simple technologies, if you know how to look at the world, like, you can see how to make what you need. So I guess it's a call back to that. It's all connected. Like, this is all ancestral knowledge, whether it's these monsters and spirits and creatures that we don't know about, or these forgotten skills of food and do-it-yourself stuff. There's no clear boundaries in life. We like it we like to pretend there are, but that we're just lying to ourselves.
Pretty much. That's awesome, man. I'm glad that you met a publisher to publish that. That's pretty great, man. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, I'm so excited, because sometimes, like, when you publish something and it's self-published, like, it'll
Yeah.
never be published in another way because publishers want something new. So, you know,
Yeah.
this one was kind of new anyways.
Yeah, I don't. So when I met you at Fort Knox in Prospect, Maine, I don't know if I told you, but I wrote a comic book that is currently in the process of being illustrated.
Whoa.
And I haven't decided if I should self-publish it or if I should try and get a publisher for the publishing of it. Because I mean, it's only going to be like 25, 30 pages, like most comic books are, and then each book is going to pick up where the last one took left off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's going to be like a long series.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. That's so cool. And you've actually got it like in production, like somebody's working on the art and everything. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's so cool. I mean, I was a terrible reader, and I only liked to read comic books when I was younger,
Same
and
here.
they opened the way for me though. Like they're such a powerful media. I still
Hmm.
like to read graphic novels, and
Yeah,
I love illustrated books, which is why like my book is illustrated. And they it just those things go together in the storytelling. And just like when you're physically telling a story, like it's nice to like pull out an object, or like you can make big movements that you can't do in a book. And comics have their own like unique sort of literary techniques that are totally different. That's really amazing. I wish I had some good advice for you, but I don't know how the comic market works.
yeah,
It's all about like figuring out like how you meet the other creators. And that was really my goal with creating these events, and maybe for you for the podcast, is like meeting people, and you
yeah.
get exposed to so many things and that you never ever would discover on your own. Like old
You're right.
fashioned, like let's talk to people is,
Hmm.
you never know what you're going to discover. You can find anything almost anything you're looking for, like if you go out and search for it, but you don't even know what you're supposed to be looking for. It's these little, like, we're having a long conversation, but even just like a little mini micro interaction, a conversation, you don't know what somebody's going to say that's going to push you in a direction. And that's what we're built for, right?
Right.
That's how human brains and societies are supposed to work. And this is a really cool, like, I mean, like podcasts are really cool media that are a way where you can get a piece of that where it's harder to get that in everyday world. So it's such a cool service of of that you're doing with this type of media as well. So thank you for that, and thanks for
Oh,
having me.
thank you. Thank you for spending a portion of your life with me just to talk to me.
Yeah.
So it's like I tell everybody that comes on, that I wouldn't even have much of a show for anybody to listen to if I didn't have people to talk to. I mean, I could do it talking to myself, but I don't know if it'd be as entertaining.
Right, it'd be hard.
Oh, yeah, and everybody comes from like they have other like different dynamics. They have different personalities. They have different jokes. They have different stories. Some stories are similar. And a lot of them are like-minded with a lot of like things that are going on in the world where like I think the majority of people that I talk to are very nature-based and I love that. I mean, what in the summertime, most of the time, I'll have my hammock outside. That's when I really can like immerse myself into a book. Is just sitting in my hammock. And when I went camping, that's all I wanted to do was just when I go camping, I just want to sit in my hammock, enjoy like the little bit of breeze and the sun and like just the nature sounds and just read a book. So yeah, I love books. I've actually, since I started this podcast, this whole, like, I don't know if you can see it from the camera's perspective, but this whole shelf right here is
Oh,
all
nice.
books from people I met through um, networking and stuff like that. And I have Michelle's book in here too. And
She's great.
yeah, so I'm gonna record with her in like 3 weeks. Um, but yeah, it's amazing the people that I've had the opportunity to meet, and I go to so the Paranormal Fair is like the second convention kind of thing that I went to. I didn't realize Lauren Coleman was sitting right there at the beginning when I first walked in. I looked at him and just like kept walking, and then when I came back out, I was like, "That was Lauren Coleman." I
Yeah.
should have talked to him.
Yeah, he's pretty awesome. I'm the assistant director of the International Cryptozoology Museum now, so I get to talk to
Oh,
Lauren like all the time. It's like he is just like such an amazing guy.
nice.
He knows so much. So
Yeah, I just watched uh a small town monsters documentary, and he was in there,
yeah,
and they talked about, the cryptozoology museum that he has in Portland, and my kids and I actually went to it before we went to the paranormal fair, which I only had my daughter for when we went up to that one. And I don't know what story you were telling, but when I came in and there was this huge crowd and everybody was like interacting with you, they were laughing, and you were acting out whatever you were doing. I was like, wow, that guy is amazing. And then I kept walking because I really wanted to meet Nomar, because he was on the podcast. So I was just like, I want to listen to this, but I want to find Nomar at the same time. So um, the way that people were watching you and smiling, I feel like it had to have been amazing.
yeah. It's such a it's such a lost art like that we don't even barely encounter anymore. Like actual like full on storytelling that's
Hmm.
you know and I teach it's about the storytelling performances I do are largely about the creatures that are in the book and what and I take on the persona of Burton Marlborough Packard, my great great grandfather. And that's why I wear a top hat and a vest and the collared shirt, and I've got the pack basket, and we're pulling objects out and people come down and you spin these yarns that are about creatures like the agropelter, or they're about ordinary creatures that have extraordinary properties sometimes, and these are stories that are so important that people pass them down long enough that somebody wrote them down, or they made it to me, or they made it to somebody that I met and learned these stories. And it's such a a joy to be able to like share those with people and see their joy. And I hope that they tell those stories as well. And people like get my book and be like, oh, I'm going to use this in like a role-playing game or a story I'm writing. And I'm like, you absolutely should, because this is like the culture of everybody here in Maine, right? Like these are the spirits, the characters of the water and the woods and the air that we should be encountering when we're out there, and they still have lessons for us. And so I hope and so just being able to tell those stories, and then people are like, oh, I want to take that home with that book, and
Yeah.
then sometimes they have the book and then they're like, I want to hear because the book isn't really like, I mean, it's like sort of storytelling, but like it's sort of like an encyclopedia field guide with like nuggets of story in it. And then that's why I wanted to put like my great great grandfather's quotes, not real quotes, in there. They're part of this tradition of sharing the stories. So while those words are not his words, they are carefully crafted to match like sort of traditional storytelling uh, techniques and like flavors, and bring that creature to life. So some people are like, oh, why would you put that in? It's just distracting because it's not real. But the story is real and important, just like the creature is real and important. And we meet these creatures through the lessons of stories, and they teach us, and then we encounter them out in the world. If you don't know what you're looking for, you won't see it, right? You will walk right by it. And like mushrooms, if you it's amazing, like how many mushrooms do we walk by and we never see? But like if you're keyed in, uh from a story we just heard, or a conversation we just had, or a book we just read, then we see the thing, or a social media post that we saw. So there's value in all these things, and they all, like it or not, this is the culture that we're in, and it's it's our job to like bring it to life. Like, it's easy to complain about the bad things or the things we've lost, but then bring them back, man. Recreate it. And like, how do you think those things happened in the first place? And it's not like, I'm setting out to intentionally do it. I'm doing it because like I'm it's just like a thing I need to do. I don't know, I was called to do, but nobody's doing the calling, but me and these stories. I feel like I almost have this obligation as I wrote these stories. Like I carry them now, and I have to speak for them. And that was the deal I made with them, and I mean that like, poetically, but I guess I mean it poetically. Like it's the real way to look at things that gives it value. Like, and just because it's poetry doesn't mean it's not describing the real world. Like, so yeah, I mean that literally and poetically, I guess. I made that deal with these guys to be able to write this book, I guess.
Yeah.
And by these guys, I mean all the 42 entries of monsters, spirits, and beings, little people and sea serpents and fearsome critters that are funny and terrible all at once. And French folklore and some indigenous folklore, and and by folklore, like, we're here talking, and this is our lore, and it doesn't mean it's fake. It's legends, as defined by anthropologists, are stories that are told as true, and so they are true to some extent, and maybe to way more extent than we know. But yeah. So yeah, that's so cool that that was a really cool storytelling event, though. And it was neat. There was a lot of people there.
Yeah, I kind of wish that I had stopped, because you were already in the middle of it, and I kind of wish that I had stopped just to check it out, because I had plenty of time to find Nomar, but like that was the first thing I wanted to do was to find him, and for whatever reason I stood there for a second, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I was like, look at all these people, and my daughter's like, what's happening? I was like, this guy's acting out a story. And but yeah, just to see everybody's reactions to you, it was amazing. And just kind of like heartwarming, I guess, in a way, just to see a diverse group of people who probably, the majority of them, probably never even seen each other, and they were all sitting, hip to hip, shoulder to shoulder, laughing with you and engaging with you, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see, man.
Oh,
And I think it's amazing. And there's one other nugget that I would like to hear you just talk about, to hopefully entice new readers of your book. The ice hornets.
Oh,
I
yeah.
found super intriguing. I was like, what? No way. I was like, that would be like when it's winter and everything's iced over, like bugs and stuff like that. That's when you don't encounter these kind of things. But then again, I have seen snow fleas too. So, if you don't mind dropping a little bit of a nugget on the ice hornets.
Yeah, the ice hornets are really interesting. They don't appear in older folklore. They are something that people have encountered more recently. They're from the Millinocket region of Maine, which is again central Maine, and sort of thereabouts in the big lakes. And of course, up here in Maine, it gets cold enough that the lakes freeze thick enough to drive a truck on and pull logs over and everything. And ice fishing is one of the great pastimes of this state. And these villages of tiny houses, ice houses or ice shacks like spring up and get pulled out, and like people are like walking from house to house, and there's a lot of like fires on the ice, and there's a lot of revelry, and people set their little traps out to catch fish, and some people are jigging, and we often go out to like drill a hole in the ice with like a hand auger or a gas auger, where you got to make that hole down through a foot or 2 feet of ice, and so I think we have this, what is below us in a lake. I don't think anybody's ever swam in like a deep lake or ocean and not for at least a second been like, oh my gosh, there could be anything underneath
Every
us.
time.
Yeah.
Every
And
time.
so like this is a bug, but it's also like a water monster, because the story is that these creatures are hornets, like tree hornets or hornets that live in a stump or somewhere, but they live in the ice, and they're like ground hornets that create these burrows down in there. And if you're drilling through there and you hit it, they'll burst out, and they're blue and white, so they're camouflaged, so we never see them. And they fly around and they swarm whoever's after them. And of course, there's only 2 ways to survive their ferocious stings. One is to find some open water by maybe near like a river that's flowing, and you jump in, but of course you're going to die if you do that. So you have to be brave and grab these fairly large hornets out of the air and bite their heads off and throw them, and then grab another one. And if you do it enough to them, then they will eventually get the message and start to leave. And that's how my neighbor treats the crows. He's got a big proper farm, and he's out there shooting the crows and hanging them from the fence. And I think that's the philosophy that works on both crows and ice hornets. And then of course we only, many people have gone out and they got their perfect spot, and then their day is over before it's even begun, because they hit these ice hornets with their auger, and then they've got to let out of there, because not anybody can just grab them out of the air and bite their heads off. And I love this creature because it's tied up with this culture, this huge culture and practice of like going out and like being on the ice to get out and fish, which is just like such a magical thing, because we spent, and it's a time where like it's hard to be outside, but then you go outside like with a purpose, and then it becomes this community event that you do. And then there's the most communitarian of all bugs that is the plague of that, along with the snow snake can be quite ferocious that time of year as well. And it's along the same lines that these cold-blooded animals can somehow live in there. And the idea, I guess, of the biology with the ice hornet is, where do they live then when there's no ice? And so we know that, of course, bees and hornets will lay eggs, and they turn into larvae, and then a lot of bugs lay eggs in the water, and then they mature and metamorphosize, and live like a dragonfly might live for 2 years in the water before it pops out as a dragonfly that flies around. And there's these swimming gill-bearing predatory insects that are an important part of the ecosystem, and these ice hornets, I guess, are a part of that in their social way. And I think bees and hornets have a special place. Like that's an animal that everybody has some feeling about, both of those. And hornets, it's mostly negative. But you got to watch out for ice is scary if you don't know how to like read it. I mean, like you see these big pressure cracks where that big piece of ice is like shifted, and you're like, am I safe out here? And I think the ice hornets are tied up in that idea of like, or is there like a spring right below where I'm standing? And so the ice is 2 feet thick, 5 feet over there, but is it 3 inches thick here, or 2 inches, or 1 inch, and I'm going to go through. And so again, it's like a call to like be cautious and be brave and be wary at the same time, and I think these, so that I think is along the fearsome critter line. And I love how many people love the ice hornet, and I I think it's great that it's one that is people still encounter with great frequency. And people say that, like, if you do get stung by an ice hornet, the surest cure is, blackberry brandy. So I don't know what that means, but it's all tied up in that fishing culture. I think the ice shack culture, ice shanties.
Yeah. For anybody who is in the warmer climates, Jen, I know you're in Florida, you probably have never even experienced ice water. And I know you listen and I know you watch. So ice fishing, we all go out, and it's funny because we get there's like 20 to 50 people out, and there's just these like little huts just big enough for you to sit inside and have like a little like fire. And the tradition is everybody goes out there, you got all your warm clothes on, and we just sit there and watch the lines and we drink. And that's a New Hampshire and a Maine thing where I don't know, and it's a lot of the times you meet people you don't even know and you become like best friends.
Yeah.
And all you do is on the weekend. Sometimes a lot of people do it during the week, or some people even take a week off of work just to go ice fishing every day, and hang out with their friends. So it's a big thing up here for anybody that doesn't know. And I'm sure it goes across all like the northern states as well. But me being from Maine, I know that it's a very big thing up here. So I found that ice hornet extremely interesting because I'd never heard of it until I read it. And I was like, oh, I should ask him. I'm definitely going to ask him about that for sure. But with that being said, are you finding fulfillment in everything that you are up to these days?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there have been so many opportunities that have come my way, and especially the last like 4 months, that it's, I think, there's an ancient Chinese curse that says, "May you always live in interesting times." I have so many amazing opportunities that, like, and I'm organizing these events and trying to write, and I have a family and a farm, and I have a full-time job as a teacher, which is a job you bring home with you sometimes. Like when we're done here, I'll go work on that. And it's so it's super fulfilling. And when you're in the moment, like having these great conversations or telling that story, or creating opportunities for others and yourself, like that is so fulfilling and nourishing. And knowing that you have like a place in the community where you are and that you feel connected to people. And that's really like why I wanted to write, was to have that that and organize events and things like that I do. So yeah, I am fulfilled by that. And it's but it's a double-edged sword. I'm also strained by that. You've got so many
Yeah.
irons, and sometimes you're just like, I'm done, like, and that's okay. Like, you're allowed to just be done. And
Yeah.
sometimes, and so yeah, it's going good. So much good stuff, and so little time.
So are you planning on writing fictional stories in the near future at all, or maybe more like the Mythical Creatures of Maine?
Well, so I'm working, so I have a whole bunch of like stories that I tell that are stories that I wrote or that I found somewhere else. And then I have the stories about the mythical creatures. And so some of those stories lend themselves to like being created into like fictional, children's books, like Lumpy's Gift that I was talking about, that the one that's coming out December 1st. And then others of those, don't, because what you can do in a storytelling interaction is not always what you can do in a book, and vice versa. And then I did actually just get a piece accepted into an anthology called Rivers of Ink, which is a celebration of people's relationship with the Penobscot River. And I actually wrote like a fictional story about a legend, and I tied in one of the creatures that was in the book. And it's just a short story. It's about a rock that's found in what's now the Katahdin Woods and Water National Monument, which is a very interesting place. And there's it's like a ghost story. And this is a charity anthology that goes actually along with my Bangor Authors Book Fair and Literary Fest that's coming up. And all the proceeds are actually going to be donated to the building a visitor center in this national monument where we just talked about. But people wrote about all sorts of things along the Penobscot River. And of course, rivers aren't just like rivers, they're also like all the waterways that flow into them, and then all the forests that are around them. And so it's the whole watershed, which is like half the state, almost, the Penobscot River. And so so I do like to write short stories. I think fictional, I don't think I'll ever write a long fiction work, but I mean, fiction is a powerful way to teach lessons and reach people, and not everybody likes to read nonfiction like folklore. I'm working on like a sequel. I thought that would be an exhaustive compilation of Mythical Creatures in Maine, but there's a part 2 coming up, and it'll be probably expand to like also like legendary people and some other types of creatures and things like that as well, that I sort of like bounded out of that book, because you have to set like limits, constraints for yourself, like otherwise like you'll never finish anything. And so I've been when I have a moment, I work on that or some of my children's books and things like that as well. So it's kind of like 2 different hats and more juggling. It's all about, if you want something done, ask somebody busy, right?
Yeah. It's fun because you bring up the Penobscot River. I love that river. I am part native, as I told you when we met, but I wasn't raised as native, so like I didn't get the stories passed down or anything like that. And I do go up there for Family Day, which is like a big weekend long powwow, which I didn't get the chance to go up there. And that's the reservation's right on, it's an island on the Penobscot River. And my grandfather was born and raised on that reservation basically, and every time when I was a kid we would just sit there and we'd throw rocks into the river and we'd go swimming in it and canoeing and stuff. It's a nice, it looks clean too for the most part of it anyways. And yeah, I like it. I enjoy it, and I enjoy the stories that you shared in the creatures that you shared in your book. And there's a lot more creatures here in Maine than I ever imagined there being. I recently started getting into the specter moose, and I'm actually considering doing a documentary next year on it. And I was like, even if we don't find the specter moose, it'll be a documentary about moose, or should I call them meese?
That's awesome.
But yeah, if that's pretty much all the questions I have for you. So if you are interested in more followers and whatever on your socials, if you don't mind, if you want to just throw out where everybody that's listening can find you.
Yeah. So I have a website. It's www.christopherpackard.com, which is my name. And then I also am very active on Facebook, I guess, more because I'm old. And so Christopher Packard, and right now it says author of Mythical Creatures of Maine. But I guess when another book comes out, I might have to change that, but it's just Christopher Packard. And then on Instagram, I'm c.s.packard. And that's a sort of an author account as well that I use. And I have a Twitter, but I don't use it, or X, I guess, whatever it's called now.
Yeah, I tried Twitter when like years ago, almost a decade now, and I was like, I don't understand this, so I'm not using it. But I think what he's trying to do with it is trying to make it a one-stop shop. So he's trying to like make it like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all in like one thing. I don't know if he'll succeed, but I don't understand the name change. But you know, people do what they do, you know.
He's a smart guy. I mean, who knows what'll happen with it. So.
Right. Well, everybody, that is the show. Please show Chris some love on his socials. Also, check out his book. He told you at the beginning where you can find it, so just go right back to the beginning. If you don't remember, Amazon is one of those avenues, if I have to remind you. But if you are interested in being featured on the show, whether you're an author like Chris, or if you have encounter stories or a good conspiracy you want to dig into, hit me up at wheretheweirdOnes@gmail.com. My Instagram is where_theweirdOnes are, and I'm also on Facebook, but I do tend to forget that there's a Facebook. So I'm mostly active on Instagram. So reach me at one of those avenues if you like today's show. Definitely like, follow, share, and subscribe. I would love a rating, but if you don't give me 5 stars, then I don't want your rating. I'm just kidding. If you really feel like you need to give a 1 star, that is totally fine. And last but not least, if you are interested in supporting the show and the things that I do, you can go buy a t-shirt or a bag, or even a pair of shoes. I put my logo on a pair of shoes. I don't even know what kind of brand of shoes they are, but they look like Chucks. So I was like, I'm definitely putting my logo on there. But that is etsy.com/shop/wheretheweirdOnes are, and you can find all of the stuff that I have for that. And I have new designs coming. All my designs are from Emily Leto, the fine art medium. So if you guys want t-shirt designs or logos or whatever, she's definitely a good person to go through. So with that being said, Chris, thank you for coming on today, and I really appreciate it. I need to find a different way to set this up, because I'm trying to like move my mouse on my computer and talk at the same time, and it's a little bit further than my mic.
You're doing a great job.
But anyways, thank you for coming on the show. I
thanks
really
for having me.
appreciate it. So anyways, everybody, you know the drill. Question everything and stay weird.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.
Because in the end, none of us have very long on this earth. Life is fleeting. And if you're ever distressed, cast your eyes to the summer sky, when the stars are strung across the velvety night, and when a shooting star streaks through the blackness, turning night into day. Make a wish.